All right, I am now recording this meeting. Very good. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce Dr. Matthews. He is our superintendent of the school district, and this means that he is the top executive of the 8th largest school district in California and the 3rd largest employer in San Francisco. A native of San Francisco, Vincent Matthews completed his pre-K to 12 education as a student at D'Avila, formerly Dudley Stone Early Education Center, Grattan Elementary, Hoover Middle, and McAteer High School. Following graduation from McAteer, Matthews earned his Bachelor of Arts, teaching credential, and eventually his doctorate in education from San Francisco State University. Early in his career as an educator, he taught at George Washington Carver Elementary School and served as principal at the Alvarado Elementary School. Before the San Francisco Board of Education selected Dr. Matthews to serve as the superintendent, he served the California Department of Education as the state-appointed superintendent of Inglewood Unified School District. Prior to that, he led the San Jose Unified School District as superintendent for 5.5 years, where he is credited with raising academic achievement, narrowing the achievement gap between Latino and white students, and passing landmark agreements with the San Jose Teachers Union. Prior to working in San Jose, he served as a state-appointed superintendent for Oakland Unified and as an area superintendent for San Diego City Schools. Dr. Matthews, we are so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for giving your time. We know you're working really hard to serve our students right now and that it's hard to take time away, but we appreciate it. So I'm going to let you go ahead and get started, and when you're finished, we'll go to all the questions that people have been sending in.
Thank you so much, Ms. Parker. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you for signing up, registering, and being here tonight. I think there's no more important place. Oh, you muted me. Now I'm unmuted. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, I will keep going. Just want to thank all of you, and my belief is that there's no more important place for you to be tonight than where you are right now, because this conversation we're having is about the most important jewels of our entire community, and those are our children. So I am going to share my screen. Okay, so is that on all your screens? Okay, just making sure. That's one of the things that previously was not expert at Zoom, and we all are, or many of us are becoming much more expert at Zoom. So once again, thank you for being here. So Ms. Parker sent me a large number of questions, and what I did was I grouped them into, I think it's 8 categories. And what I wanted to do tonight is spend about the first 10 to 15 minutes trying to answer those questions. I'm going to give you as much information as I have. One of the things to keep in mind is that in this situation with shelter in place and with the pandemic and with COVID-19, things are changing rapidly. And so I'm giving you the information that we have to date. I'm going to try to answer as many questions as possible. But my hope is that there is an understanding that things have changed. They've changed over the last 2 months. They changed to where we are today. So my hope is that there is some grace out there in terms of what I'm not able to answer. But I'm going to give you everything that I have. You have my word on that. So let's see. So these are the buckets or the themes that I saw in the questions that were sent to me. There were questions about summer programs. There were questions about calendars for next year and times. There were questions around how are we thinking about space and classrooms. There were questions around distance learning and lost learning and the teaching structure. There were questions about distance learning and the way we're teaching and how the impact that has on working parents. There were questions about communications, about the governor's budget, and then around lessons that we have learned as a system over these past 2 months. So those are the questions, the way that I have grouped them. I'm going to answer those themes of questions, and then I'm going to open it up for Ms. Parker to either go through the chat or go through previous questions and give me even more. So first of all, I started with summer because that's most immediate and upon us. And then I'll talk more about the rest of those themes all center around next year. And so with summer programs, first, let me tell you that for summer, the programs that we offer will be offered remotely. And they'll be both digital and non-digital, but we will continue not having students in school for the summer. So I wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that. And the programs that we are offering are programs for credit recovery and for eligible students with IEPs. We also are going to provide summer program for our current pre-K families who have a year-round contract. So I know there were many questions that centered around whether we were going to have programs, whether students were going to be back. I know at one point the governor said something about July 1. That is not going to happen. So students will not be in brick and mortar buildings during the summer. And I wanted to make sure that's clear. This morning I heard the mayor was on KTVU and she was talking about trying to start up some summer programs. It sounded like a lot were going to be virtual, but there is some efforts in our city to start up summer programs or do some type of programming to give students access and keep students busy and keep their minds busy. And I know that's being thought of at the city level, but I just wanted to make sure people knew that there will not be students in buildings during the summer. So before I get to the rest of the school year, I wanted to tell you what we are doing, what we're in the middle of. We know that we are in the process of thinking about how we're going to return students to school. And we wanted to make sure that one of our themes has been to be aggressive in our actions, but to also make sure we are being intelligent and we have a sense of urgency. So we actually put out an RFQ for project management facilitation around how we're going to return students to school. This RFQ is really around making sure that we're returning schools in a safe and equitable, returning students in a safe and equitable manner. So, and let me say that I want to make sure this is clear because a couple of times as we've talked about this, people have said, okay, when this facilitation happens, the facilitator or the facilitator is making decisions. No, the facilitator is just facilitating the process for us to have an in-depth conversation, community conversation around what in-person schooling will look like and how we will eventually return students safely back to school. So the RFQ period ended Friday. Our expectation is to interview and to take a name to the board at the June 9th meeting. And we expect to have this conversation in June with recommendations moving forward to the board around the end of July about how we return. And a big thing to keep in mind is that as we're thinking about returns and how we come back, it really is around, as you see in the second bullet point, safe and equitable. So we're working closely with our Department of Public Health partners around this return and what it's going to look like. So there were questions about calendars and times. So the first thing I wanted to make sure that everyone knows is that we negotiate our calendar with our partners, our teachers union. And at this point, we have not proposed a new calendar. So August 17th remains the first day of instruction. As I said, the governor said, in one of his many press conferences, he mentioned July 1st that students may return or can return. That's not where we are right now. So August 17th remains the first day of instruction. Around times, this is something that we believe that will be a part of the facilitated discussion. Start times, how that's going to happen, and I'll talk more about that as I go through the next few items. So what are we thinking about when we think about space and classroom? And I want to make sure these are thoughts we're having. Nothing has been decided. The decisions or the recommendations will come through that facilitated process that I talked about. But these are some of our thoughts. If it is not safe, if we working with our Department of Public Health partners, if we don't believe it's safe to bring students back, then distance learning will continue, but we're not there yet. So I want to make sure that's clear. I want to make sure people don't leave this room and say this, the superintendent said we will be in distance learning in the fall. That has not been decided at this point. But I wanted to give you some of the thoughts we're having. So that's one, there could be continuing with distance learning. Another thought is that if in some way it is, we believe with the Department of Public Health that it is safe to bring students back in some way, these are some of the thoughts we're having. There could be a combination of virtual learning, so some students learning virtually, and some students, and whenever you see brick and mortar, that means students in buildings. So there may be some combination of virtual and some combination of brick and mortar, maybe some students all virtual, some students all brick and mortar, some students virtual part-time, brick and mortar part-time. These are all the things we're beginning to think about and weigh on how, if it is safe to bring students back, how we could bring them back in a safe way. Another thing that we're thinking about or looking at is staggered starts, where students, maybe some students would go from 8 to 11:30, 8 to noon. Other students start and go from noon to 4. Just giving you some ideas that we're thinking about staggered times. And the reason why that you see either that combination or the staggered is because one of the areas that Department of Public Health has already stated is that the belief that if we are back in buildings, there will have to be less students in the buildings. So we could not have, if we have a middle school of 1,000 students, you would not be able to have 1,000 students in the building. So what are ways that we could have, if we're bringing students back, having students, less students in the building? You see the Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, with half coming the first part of Friday, half coming the second part of Friday. Could be some students a week on, a week off. One of the things that they have said in terms of safety is students traveling in a bubble, which means a cohort of students, even at the middle school and the high school, would travel together throughout the day. They would have English together, math together. And I know that's difficult because students have different English levels, different math levels. But if students in some way could be in some types of bubble where they only have contact with that same group of students, the Department of Public Health felt that would be safer than students mixing throughout the day. And I do want to say that one of the health experts, he gave a description of where COVID-19 is transmitted the best. And this is what the description he gave. It's in places where it's indoor, where people are coming across each other constantly, where people are usually talking in loud voices, voices are raised, where there's a number of smooth surfaces for people to have contact, where there is usually water fountains that are shared or bathrooms that are shared or common eating areas. And so when you hear that description, it's the description of a school. And so that's why one of the keys that the Department of Public Health, as they're saying, you know, right now there's phase like 2A, where people are being able to go into some smaller stores or at least pick up or drive by. It's because they don't have all the combination of description or descriptors that I just described, which is a school, and which is why the DPH and the conversations we're having, they're being so thoughtful about the return to school, and we're trying to be as extremely thoughtful about the return to school also. So distance learning, as many of you know, we had 3 phases. The first, well, before I talk about distance learning, I want to say that the school system was basically designed in the late 1700s, and there have been some changes, but pretty much the teacher standing in front of the classroom giving instruction has been typical throughout the system of instruction and the system of education. Our mission as a district is that we will provide for each and every student quality instruction and equitable support so that they can thrive in the 21st century. So we have tried to tweak, tried to make changes so that we are better able to prepare students for the 21st century. With that being said, when March 16th hit, we were not at a place where we could instantly go from in-face teaching to teachers teaching from home and students automatically getting on computers. There were just a number of barriers in the way of that. So we had 3 phases. The first phase was we had lessons available for parents to access. Then phase 2 was when we increased the digital backpack and gave more access, and teachers were starting to reach out. And phase 3, which has been the phase from approximately April, I think it was 11th or 12th until now, and that's what you see in front of you, where the pre-K kinder students are using print-based learning kits, and families should be getting a phone call from teachers. 3rd through 12th grade have been teaching lessons online. The same again, teachers communicating with students. And then whether your child is kindergarten or high school, you should expect about 4 hours of schoolwork each day. There were questions about lost learning. Since we don't have as much, 4 hours isn't where we were, and how we're going to make that up. And I'm going to be straight with you. Right now, we're still trying to perfect distance learning. So we have not thought about, or we're more trying to perfect distance learning and make it happen in the ways that it should happen. And the focus has been less on lost learning. I will talk more about teaching structures when I talk about with the parents, but we're looking and we're evaluating what we're doing and how we're doing. We're getting many comments from parents. I will say this, that definitely our teachers were and are at different places, but each and every one of them is committed to doing the best they can for students. And I've watched over time as skills that they didn't have, they are picking up and hearing from parents and trying to do things in the best way. No teacher sets out to say, I'm just not going to give students the instruction they deserve. No administrator is saying, I'm not going to do my job in administrating. COVID-19 or the pandemic hit us all, and I am proud of the job that our teachers and our administrators have done in trying to manage and move this forward and doing everything they can to give the young people of this district the best instruction that they can, especially in terms of all the barriers that have been placed in front of them. And I'm sure we've heard questions, not only questions, but I've received many comments and emails from who believe it, who are appreciative and say, they understand and they know this is the best they can do. Some have told me it's been outstanding, and others have said it just hasn't been what they've expected or up to par. And I understand all of that, but I want you to know that in the conversations that I have with teachers regularly, with administrators regularly, they are giving it their all. One of the questions, or many of the questions, were about working parents and how we are structuring instruction, especially for working parents. Our goal is to evaluate how instruction in the spring, what worked, what didn't work, and our goal is to continue to improve and increase lessons to make sure we're accessing all of our students in the best ways possible. Some of the things, and it goes both ways. We have, there are times when teachers have had a lesson where students needed to be in front of the computer, and it's at the same time that parents need the computer to work. So then teachers have moved towards, okay, well, let me put a lesson, and I'll do the lesson early in the morning and then put it online so students can access it when they can access it. And then we have received some concerns about, well, I want my students to have more face-to-face time. So we're doing the best we can. Just, I guess what I'm saying is I'm hoping people understand that there are a large number of expectations. And as a district, as a large urban district and a very diverse district, we're doing the best we can to manage instruction and move instruction forward and meet the needs of as many students as we possibly can. So there were questions about communications and how we can communicate better. As you see on the side, this is the number of, well, you can see all the ways that we try to access you through website, through Parent View. We're tweeting quite a bit. We're putting our messages on Facebook. Critical messages, we email, we text, we send out calls. I would say if you can access the website, the best way to get information is every Wednesday we put out at 6 o'clock, there is a district digest. It comes out every Wednesday on the website. This is, as you see, this is, I believe, it was from yesterday.
Stop. Do not.
I just made it yesterday. And you can see that, you can see the information. That's just one slide of one, but I wanted you to see that's just some of the information that's there. Eligible families, information for them. We're letting you know about no meal pickups, guidance for children, face covering. Then you see meals available, resources for family digest. This is one page of about 30 that's on this one site or this one area of the website. The place to go for sure is Wednesday nights. You don't have to do it just Wednesday night. You can do it Thursday or Friday. But that access to the website every Wednesday will give you the most up-to-date information. And as we're getting more information about what we will send it out, of course, as soon as we have an announcement about the actual fall, what it's going to be. But if you want to get detailed information and everything we're thinking about, the digest is the best place, and that's every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. But these are all the other ways that we are reaching out and pushing out information for parents. So the governor, so in January, the governor proposes a budget, and then we have what's called the May Revise. And the May Revise is the governor's opportunity to revise the budget he's proposing before it goes in front of the legislature. So first of all, before I get to the May Revise, I want to talk to you about just some of the things. These are areas where we receive dollars from you, and I can say, having been a longtime resident of San Francisco, your generosity towards the schools is unbelievable, and it's deeply appreciated. And I also think it's necessary if we're going to provide the best education possible. What you're seeing are cuts to our budget just in this year or just in the last 2 months, based upon what's happening with the pandemic. So the dollars we would have received from sales tax are down 8.2 million. The interest that we would have received is almost another $1 million. We get a PEEF allocation, which is dollars to that goes towards our arts and our libraries and our sports programs. That's down, as you see, almost 10 million. The base for PEEF is down 1.4 million. So this is before the governor's budget, and you can see that's almost 20 million that has just been wiped out of our budget. And that's this year's budget. That's not even the budget going forward. So usually when you get this year's budget, the budget is pretty safe and pretty stable. And then as you see below, this is just, I guess, the largest area. There are more cuts from the governor's budget, but the largest area is the LCFF cuts, and that's our base funding. And you can see that he has proposed 10% from our base funding, which would be, this is along with all the other cuts, but a $54 million cut. This is by far, I've been a superintendent I've been doing this work for the last 34 years. I know you're all shocked because I can't be more than 30. the gray gives it away. But I've been doing this for 34 years and teaching and principal and superintendent, and been a superintendent for the last 14. And being in those last 14, even through the recession years, the budget that's being proposed is one of the biggest cost cuts I've seen in my time in doing this. And I definitely want to hammer that home. Those of you who can be on the PTA meeting next week, definitely be there. We are going to need your assistance otherwise the cuts that are coming are like nothing I've ever seen. And this is in a time where if we are going to bring students back in some way, shape, or form, we are going to need more dollars. Think about masks we're going to need, hand sanitizer. If it's half, how we do that. In any case, in any of those scenarios that I gave you, all of those will require more dollars. And so at a time, it's really hard to even think about bringing students back in a safe manner when you're cutting these kinds of dollars out of the budget. So if I haven't said that, I want to hammer that home. These cuts are more draconian than any cuts that I've seen. So now the governor has said he will be able to put a lot of this back if the HEROES Act passes. If the HEROES Act passes in the next when the Republicans have their shot. The House has already passed it. The Republicans need to pass it. So if you have friends in Republican states, their districts are struggling too. So the hope is that they will put pressure on the Republican senators. But there are ways. You'll hear more ways next week about advocacy. That the biggest balloon that we have on the horizon right now is that HEROES Act, and we're going to need assistance in making sure that it passes. And finally, before I open it up to Ms. Parker to ask me other questions that have either come on the chat or questions that I haven't answered, there was many questions about what are the lessons that we've learned over this period, like more that we want to keep in place, or just lessons learned that in moving forward that we see that have been that have been fruitful. We have seen the benefits of flexible instruction. Something that we've had like alternative schools. We had some schools where they have provided some instruction in a flexible way, but we're seeing more and more of the benefits of flexible instruction. And one of those scenarios that I put forward was you saw virtual learning and then some brick and mortar learning. I think we're going to see more of that as we move forward. Eliminating the digital divide. I think a number of the newscasters have said, the pandemic caused the digital divide, or the pandemic caused the achievement gap. And we know, parents and those of us in education know that that's not the case. This has shown just an even brighter light on the digital divide. But we've always known it's there. And with that light being shown on it, it's given us the opportunity to make sure that we have devices in the hands of students who have needed devices. We've been able to say, come forward and get those devices, as well as making sure students have access through hotspots. And I think that for me personally, what I would want to do is figure out how we can keep those devices in those students' hands and keep those hotspots where they are right now. We're continuing to learn the importance of making sure there's educational equity. I just talked about it through digital divide, through making sure our students are fed. We're learning more about personalized learning as more teachers are contacting students and having that one-on-one learning through this digital platform. We are really focused on and reaching out with a healing informed approach, finding out how people are. We've started calling families, checking on students. If we were back in brick and mortar fully, and we don't know when that would be. But one of the things that I would want to keep doing is making sure that we keep moving forward with a healing of informed approach. It's important and critical that we identify our priority students. And then we're starting to really look at who's best served via brick and mortar and who would be best served via virtual. So we're trying to figure that out. We're learning as we go. Finally, I'll say that when we closed, and you may or may not know this, but we were the first district in California to announce that we believe that the health and safety of our students and our parents and moving all 56,000 people back and forth across town is not a safe way to be conducting business at this time. So we were the first district to announce that we were closing. Then many others followed right after we did that. When we extended the closure, we took a regional approach. We didn't do it alone. We did it across 6 counties with 6 county superintendents and 6 departments of public health all coming together to extend the closures twice. And so we have learned over this period that this regional approach to solving problems, to coming together, to talking about our issues regionally makes the most sense. We are moving forward with, as I said earlier, the request for quote, and we think that in some way, shape, or form, some of our regional partners will be involved in that, whether it's just sitting and watching and replicating that approach or being at the table with us. But we see this, there's quite a bit of value in that regional approach. So I have talked for quite a while. I'm going to stop there, and I am going to open it for questions. And let me ask Ms. Parker, do you want me to leave this screen up, or do you want me to put it back to, you tell me what you want me to do.
Why don't you stop sharing your screen?
Okay.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. Thank you for all of that information. Our chat box has been really busy, and hopefully I've been trying to monitor it. I know we have a few people from the district PTA trying to watch that chat box, and some of the ones that I saw coming through, hopefully I'll capture in some of the questions. So as I mentioned before, we had about 250 questions come in, and there's lots of common themes with them. And so I'm going to try to pick through and see if there's some more information that, that you can provide to us, but we appreciate what you have shared so far. Maybe I'll just start kind of on decisions and communication. Could you just, I know you talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but could you all just quickly talk again about who makes decisions about what? You know, people have heard from the governor about when schools might start and those kinds of decisions. You know, who makes decisions about the calendar? Who makes decisions about what instruction looks like? How the spaces look like? Who is making those decisions? So everybody in this room is clear about that.
Thank you. So the decisions and the way our structure is, decisions are made locally. I, as the superintendent, run schools and I'm in charge of the schools, but the school board hires me to run schools. So I report to the locally elected school board. So when we decided to close schools, it was a school board decision made with the superintendent. We're called a governance team. So these decisions are local. You've heard the governor make some comments about schools can start July 1. But he doesn't have the authority to actually make schools open or the authority to close schools. Those decisions are made locally. There was another area you asked about. So the decision about opening, the start of school, that's another local decision that's made between the district and our teaching partners. So you want to mute that? You want to mute?
Yep, trying to mute them.
Okay. It's a decision, kind of hard with 890, but it's a local decision. It's a local decision that we make and it's part of a contract that we have and the contract is a agreement with our partners, our instructional partners around when the calendar is. So that decision is made with the district and our teachers union.
Great. And can you also talk a
question.
little bit about, so I'm going to have everybody who has questions, just put them in the chat and we'll collect them later. I'm not going to have anybody ask live questions because we've got a big line of questions that have come in already. And hopefully we'll cover them all. So if you can just all
Yeah,
keep
but
your
this
questions.
one, it has to do with the social distancing because our schools are crowded. So how do you expect?
Yeah, Uzuri, we absolutely want to answer your questions. We've just got I have a long line of questions and hopefully we'll get to them. So keep putting them in because we're going to make sure they get answered. So I'm going to just continue with this. Could you talk again, Superintendent, about the timeline when you'll be announcing decisions?
Yeah, so right now, let me tell you that our expectation is, and one of the things that as soon as the facilitator comes on board, the first thing we will publish is a calendar. I'll give you a general of my expectations is that we would have community input sessions between, I would say, the first couple of weeks of June all the way to towards the end of June. Then that input would be cycled through and brought forward. And the expectation would be that sometime around mid-July, if not early to mid-July, we would be making announcements. And along the way, if we can make, from the data that we have and from the conversations that we're having with DPH, if we can make commitments and communication to the community that, hey, we know this is going to happen, so we're going to tell you now, we will do that. We won't wait to make everything, everything has to be in a package. If we know, for example, that, hey, there is no way that we're going to be able to open schools, then we will make that announcement earlier. As soon as we know information, we're going to get that information to you. And I'll say this, one more thing on that is that, as I said earlier, that things are changing so rapidly. 3 weeks ago, the Department of Public Health really was in the conversation that we were having. The thoughts were that there was no way that schools could go back in the fall. It just wasn't possible. And in 3 weeks' time, the conversation has, now that still may be, and that still may happen, but the conversation has shifted from no way to, if it were to happen, what would it look like? We don't know it's going to happen. It still may be that it doesn't happen because it's just not safe. But at this point, those are the conversations that are happening.
Okay, great. And then, and so you said you'll have community input sessions in June, and does that include ways for parents to contribute all of their thinking on? Okay.
So the whole process of those community conversations is to make sure we have as many people at the table, as many people representing different groups being at the table to give input. And then I just said this earlier to another group, and one of the conversations we will have is, okay, who's missing from this table? Who did we miss? And that's a constant question we're going to be asking.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. So we'll be looking to all the different stakeholders, the teachers, the parents, and look at different communities all around the city, not just certain communities. It'll be everybody. Okay.
And not just it's a question, not just if we say, hey, who wants to come to the table? And then we're just expecting those who raise their hand to come. We know that as a district, we have to reach out and say, we need you at this table.
Okay, good. And I know the PTA would be happy to help get the word out as much as possible to all around the city as we are able to help you, because we know that that parents really want to have a voice in that. Great. And we had a couple of questions. I wonder if you can just do a quick clarifying. Some questions came up around the communication from the district around instruction ending on May 22nd. There was some confusion around the district messaging there and whether that would stop, and then teachers were doing something else for the last few weeks of school. Could you just quickly answer that, since we had a couple questions there?
Yeah, so instruction will continue until the last day of school. Is that clear that up?
That's very clear. Right. There was some confusion. Some parents thought that instruction would end on the 22nd, and then it would teachers would be doing conferences through the end of school. And so just to be clear for everybody, instruction is going until the last day of school.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
That's not true. They were told they don't have to keep teaching and they can do parent conferences.
Okay. So it sounds like that there is also some confusions at school sites. And so I think it would be great to have Well, I think the superintendent hearing that is helpful. And so maybe he can follow up with the staff at the district to make sure teachers are getting the consistent message and administrators are, if that's inconsistent across our schools.
And
So I think he was wrong. Can you please explain what you told the teachers?
Okay. We'll make sure we get that addressed. Thank you. And it looks like you're from Star King, so I think that's helpful to know. And I'll make a note as well. All right, and so I'm just going to also just ask, since we have nearly 1,000 people in this meeting, if you all could have some patience with us. We had no idea we'd have quite so many people, and if you can continue to put your questions in the chat box and keep yourself muted, that'll just help us keep this a little streamlined, and we will make sure that we're capturing everything. We get a transcript of the chat box when this meeting is over, and we'll make sure that we pull all this information, because everything that all of you are saying is important. We want to make sure it gets communicated to the right places, so that all of these things can be addressed. And we've also been asking, with all the information you're all sharing with us, we are asking if the district can put together an FAQ and more information to communicate the information that you all are asking for, because we know this is really uncertain and there's just a lot of questions. So we will do our best to help advocate with you to get those questions answered. So another question I'm wondering about, Dr. Matthews, is when you talk about determining when school will start, I've heard lots of teachers and parents wonder about actual children and student behavior, and whether it's possible for students to socially and physically distance themselves from their peers. And so how much are you all thinking and considering those kinds of questions when you're thinking about in-person instruction and getting our students back in the same spaces? Absolutely.
So that's a huge consideration. As I said, I gave the description of where and how the COVID spreads. And a big part of that is when I named some, but one of the things I didn't name was when people are within less than 6 feet of each other is another way. And so that's a big consideration as we're getting some guidelines guidance from the Department of Public Health. There's some things that we know are realistic and some things that are unrealistic. And if the expectation especially is that if small children are in a small space or a space, the expectation that they're going to consistently and constantly stay 6 feet apart is just unrealistic. So it's not just the guidance. When I say that we're having conversations with the Department of Public Health, it's not just the Department of Public Health saying this is what you must do. It's a back and forth with the Department of Public Health saying, hey, they give a suggestion, and then the question is, how would this work? And then superintendents are either saying, yes, that will work, or no, there's no way that's going to work. So we're taking all of that into consideration. You just mentioned about students staying apart. So one of the suggestions was about students staying in a bubble, but then we had to then say, well, wait a minute, even if you have those students in a bubble, if you're in a middle school or a high school, students are going into, well, especially at a high school, students are going into different classes. So not all students who are in one bubble go to the same, I may have the same English class with you, but I'll have a different math class than you are. I'll be in Spanish while you're in, some other elective. So that's another area that we're having with the Department of Public Health, making them understand which of the suggestions or guidance areas that they're looking at are realistic and which are just unrealistic.
Thank you.
That was a long answer to your question, but the question is, yes, we are looking at that.
Okay, thank you. And then I've also some questions. We've had lots of questions come up around, and some tonight, some in the chat box, lots ahead of time, around childcare and parents working from home. And those are lots of parents, lots and lots of parents in our district cannot work from home and are essential workers in one way or another. And if we are going to have any element of remote school, childcare will be essential in order for parents to be working. And so are there more conversations that you're aware of with the city about how to do that, and employers who are not part of the city to have increased flexibility and just provide more childcare options for parents who are working and may not be able to support at-home learning if there are some parts of that during next year?
Yeah, that goes back to the slide that I had that says we're looking at the structures of what we're doing. We also know that as we go through these phases, the more phases we go through, more people are going back to work. And, one of the things, I know most of this group realize this, if not all of this group, the critical nature of schools, but there are some people who, if they didn't think about it before, they really know now the critical natures of school. It's not just education, which is our key component, but it's also for so many students, for homeless students, we're the shelter for them. For students who for so many, we're the major provider of nutrition for them, and counseling, nursing services. So the critical nature of what schools provide for students, if it wasn't apparent before, it has become really apparent. And so we are definitely having those conversations with the city, but we're also that we know that there is, to be honest with you and to be completely transparent, also going to be more pressure around, as you just said, the needs for, as people are starting to go back to work, the needs for student care. And so we're having those conversations with the city about how we can do that in a safe manner.
Okay, thank you. And then what about lots and lots of questions we've had about after school? It's related, related to childcare, but a lot of questions about after school programs happening once we move to some type of in-person learning, even if it's in one of those variations that you described, it's every other day or part days or whatever. What kind of options are we thinking about for after school and before school childcare?
Yeah, so we are, as I said, we're trying to think about distance learning first and foremost. How would we get schools up and running, and whether that's going to be virtual or not? I would say the conversations about after school have basically centered in meetings with our CBO partners. We want to continue those conversations, but to be transparent, the biggest conversation we're having right now, really as a district, really centers on how we're going to get distance learning. So that's my way of saying that the conversation about after school has been less. We know that's going to have to ramp up, because in each stage, we know that it basically trickles out, and there are more areas that have to be covered, and we will get there. But right now, it's really looking at distance learning and how we could do that. Not distance learning, but what learning will look like as we move forward into this next school year.
Okay. I want to just pivot for a minute. I know we're getting towards the end of our hour here, and there are so many more questions people have. Could we talk for just a few minutes about our students with special needs and how, I know that has been a struggle to figure out how to make sure we're meeting those needs over these last couple of months. And can you talk a little bit about that now, how we're thinking about that now, and as you're making considerations for next year? So that's the first part. And then I have another question about other student needs.
Yeah, as you said, that has been a struggle. We have so many students with special needs. I think our special ed department has been extraordinary in at least in looking at and discussing and addressing and trying to figure this out. But I'd say that's one of the areas that has been a bigger gap than and I, one of the things that I will say is that I've watched the staff as they have not shied away from these issues, but actually taken them on. And some we have just said we can figure out and we can meet these needs, and others we have found out that we're just not equipped to do what we need to do in a distance format. So that's I'm sorry I can't give you more information on that, but that's an area that we're continuing to look at and continue to try to serve.
Okay, and you may have a similar answer, but I know some of the other groups of students that have struggled during this time are our English learners. That is difficult not to be in person and have perhaps parents who don't speak English who are trying to assist you and help you. Do you have anything you can share about that?
So we have, over time, we've gotten better. We just released our second wave of distance learning in more languages. Not only there we've struggled, but even in our board meetings, we have just basically overcome making sure that we have translators available, and that took us a month and a half to get that all worked out. We, as an organization, I can say, have there been pitfalls and stops and starts? Absolutely. But we're committed to doing everything we can. Once we see an area, then the question becomes, okay, how are we going to solve this issue?
Okay. And then let's see, a couple more if we can keep going. If people don't mind, do you mind if we go an extra few minutes, Dr. Matthews, to try to get through just a few more? Okay, thank you. We also have lots of families who are experiencing homelessness, for whom this is a really trying time to try to support their kids with distance learning, with technology, with all of the challenges that the rest of us are facing if we are housed, but they have particular challenges. And so can you talk a little bit about how the district is supporting those families right now?
So we have, one of the things that we have realized is, as I talked earlier, is that, well, we not have realized, we knew that there is a digital divide. We knew that there is even if you have the tool, but you don't have access. So that is one of the ways we have reached out specifically. In some cases, we have said, hey, we have hotspots, we have devices. For homeless families, in many cases, we have reached directly out to get contact. So instead of waiting, and that's one of the things we talked about before about who's going to be at the table. So we've reached directly out to make sure we're putting them in the hands of our homeless students, many of our homeless students and families. I would also say that it's very similar with nutrition. It's making sure that we are blanketing and putting flyers out in the spots where we know that where homeless families are coming together, to make sure that they know these are spots for access to food. These are spots to access where devices are. And then also trying, like I just showed you on the website, it said where services are available, making sure we're doing everything we can to get flyers out. For example, when families are picking up food, we're trying to get the flyers out to make sure people know other opportunities, not only our opportunities, but other opportunities through the city to get food, to get resources. And we've also started a call-in resource number where people can call in. And that's been, I think we're averaging 600, 700, 800 calls a week.
Wow, that's great.
That's also information that's directly on the website.
Great. And so we'll make sure that we share some of those links out after this meeting. For those of you who may be looking for them, we'll try to compile a list of those for you. All right, I think maybe at least 2 questions I have here. We've had some people asking here in the chat, and we had some ahead of time. I know we were talking about this, there's learning loss, and, it's a challenging time for everybody. And we have some students who already are facing opportunity gaps. And that's one of the priorities, and is actually named as the top priority in our district, is the African-American, closing the African-American achievement gap. And so just wondering if there are some strategies you all are thinking about going into next year to assess where students are, to be able to fill in some of those gaps and support that, since it's one of the district's goals.
Yes, one of the keys that we expect to look for is to look at, and we're actually asking this question now as we are reaching out to families. So we're doing wellness checks, we're reaching out to families, but we're asking that question. So it's not just looking at data, but actually asking the questions that you just asked. How are students learning? Do you feel your students are learning? Do you see progress being made? But then, of course, we'll also look at data once students return. We know that the gap has been there, but we know that our belief is that the pandemic has exacerbated the gap. So then the question becomes, what are the additional resources we need to put in place? And that's something that we're beginning to talk about, but it becomes more difficult to discuss additional resources when I showed you the slide of what's about to hit the district. And if, $100 million is taken out of the district's budget, it's a difficult conversation to have about additional resources.
Right. Okay. This is kind of a multi-part question. We've had a lot of parents asking about what if they have vulnerable family members. If they live, we have lots of multi-generational families in San Francisco, some of whom may be at risk, especially to be exposed to coronavirus and face health difficulties. We have students who face that, and so if a family if we were to do in-person instruction in the fall and a family doesn't feel that's in the health interest of their student, they want to keep them at home, how will you all, do you know how you all would respond to that? And we've had a lot of people asking if they need to choose to do that for the health of their families, can they keep their spot at their school, or are they giving it up? Or if they're a fifth grader in a school, are they giving up their spot to their feeder middle school? Or do you have any idea how you all might handle that?
Yes. So what I would want is for people to think about that last week before we said we're not going forward with schools. We were, as I said, the first district to close, but we also, as other districts were struggling with, I talked directly to other district superintendents who had said, you can keep your child home, but it is an unexcused absence. We absolutely, if people remember, we said, no, we totally understand that. We understand to the best of our ability what's going on around us. And we said it is an excused absence if you choose to keep your child home. So we understand that people would make that decision, or may want to make that decision. If, let's say, for example, we were back to some kind of brick and mortar and virtual, we would absolutely want to give, I think that's the first way we would go is, if we went that way. At this point, we don't know if we are, but if we were to go that way, we would definitely make sure that that option was given to people before, assignments started. We want to make sure. So one of the things that I actually had someone text me today. This is another parent from another district, but the question was, when are you going to get the schools open? And the response, then they were saying it in a way like, I want my kid back in school now. And my question back to them was, if I opened the schools today, would you send your kid back today? And then the response was, there is no way I would. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we know is that people are at different places. If we don't believe that it's safe to reopen schools, we just would not, and we would continue with distance learning. The second piece of that, though, if in some way, shape, or form we felt we could do it in some type of safe way, we would absolutely want to make sure that if there was a hybrid model, we would give people the option, especially because we want people to feel safe. We want you to know that you feel comfortable and safe with your child returning to whatever environment is in place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that I've seen some comments in the chat. We may have some follow-up questions to that we can send to you later and get out to all of the people on this call. Related to that, we have some.
Okay, I'm going to say this. I made a promise to my family, so this is going to have to be the last one.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to do that. Okay. The last question is then related to teachers. We also have teachers who are have health situations of their own. And so if you have a teacher who professionally who is in front of a classroom, but also does feel that they're at a health risk, how will they handle that situation?
And we have not worked that out, but I know we would. And it may be that for, let's say, we have enough third graders who want to be virtual, and this teacher is a third grade teacher, then that would be the teacher for those kids. We're not there yet, so we haven't worked that out yet. But okay. I think one of the things I said is we want to be aggressive in our actions, but we want to also make sure there's a sense of urgency, and we're doing it with intelligence. So we're using the data to make the best decision possible, but we also want to operate with grace and compassion. And my belief is that we have done everything we can to do that as a district. When I think about our core values, we absolutely want to make sure that one of those values is social justice. So it's making sure that those most in need get what they need.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. And I know that you need to leave. And so what I just want to share with everybody is that we do really value everything that you are sharing within the chats and all of your questions. We will do follow up with Dr. Matthews in the office and see what questions we could get answered for all of you. Please keep them coming. We do want to hear them. Thank you so much for your time.
Let me just say one more thing. My commitment is I know there's a lot of questions, but if you get us those questions, we will just do what I did, group them, get answers to them, and then put a FAQ from this meeting, and it'll say FAQ from the PTA meeting from May 20th, answers to those questions. And once again, I want to thank the 749. I know at one point it was almost 900, I think. I don't know if it went over 900. But the 900 of you who were, and the 749 who are still here, rapidly dropping, who are still here.
You said you can sing. Can you sing us out?
Yeah, I don't think, yes, I can. There's no more important.
Yes, Dr. Matthews.
There's no more important place for you to be tonight than here, because it involves the education and the health and safety of your children. So I just want to thank you for being out tonight and for joining this call.
Thank you very much. Just as a final announcement for all of you, as you heard, we need more money to make all this happen. And so we are going to be reaching out to all of you a lot to help, ask you to help us and have you lead advocacy efforts in your own communities, at your own schools. If you join us in our meeting next Wednesday night at 7:30, I will send that link out around. We will be talking about how to join together to advocate for more funding, local, state, and federal. And we will continue to provide the information that you all need. So let us know what else you're looking for, and we'll see if maybe we can do another one of these again, whenever we have more information to share. So thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for coming. And I will share the recording for this. So if you missed it, somebody else or you missed part of it, or somebody missed it, there will be a recording that you can view later. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
The whole
What
school.
was the question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Look at that number going down rapidly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
very
night.
much.
Go Argonne.
Chemistry.
Argonne.
Hi, Lily. Bye.
Go to J-Lo. Woo!
This was nice.
What do we always say? 60 miles per hour